I still remember the exact moment when my world collapsed. It was a Thursday evening, and I was sitting in my truck outside the Grand Meridian Hotel. A classy place, one I couldn't afford on a whim, but apparently my father-in-law Howard could. My dashboard camera was recording as I watched my wife Eliza stroll through the revolving doors, her hand intertwined with a man who definitely wasn't me. The man drove a Jaguar. I drove a truck. The distinction had apparently become important. What cut the deepest wasn't just seeing her kiss him in the lobby. It was the text that lit up my phone moments later, sent from my father-in-law to my wife. Room 712 is booked for 2 nights. He's bringing champagne. Alex still thinks you're at a work conference. Enjoy the upgrade, sweetheart. I didn't scream. I didn't chase after them. I simply sat there, hands trembling on the steering wheel, watching as the man I had saved from financial ruin orchestrated my humiliation. Howard Winters had always been the kind of man who measured worth in thread counts and car models. A financial advisor with a reputation for luxury and connections, he'd cultivated an image of success that had intimidated me when I first started dating his daughter Eliza 7 years ago. "He's just protective," Eliza would say whenever Howard gave me those appraising looks over dinner, his eyes lingering on my calloused hands. "You have to understand, he always imagined me with someone from our circle." I wasn't from their circle. I'd built my contracting business from scratch, working 16-hour days with my hands while putting myself through business school at night. By the time I proposed to Eliza, I had 15 employees and contracts across 3 counties. It wasn't Howard-level wealth, but it was honest work that I was proud of. The wedding was lavish, Howard's influence, but our early marriage was simple and, I thought, happy. We bought a modest 4-bedroom home with a large yard. I expanded the business, focusing on sustainable building practices that were gaining traction with higher-end clients. Eliza worked as a marketing director at a local firm. We talked about children, renovations, the future. I believed we were building something real. Then came Howard's disgrace. It happened quickly. An investment scheme gone wrong, accusations of mismanaged funds, clients fleeing. Within 3 months, Howard lost his license, his reputation, and then his home when the lawsuits started rolling in. Eliza was devastated, watching her titan of a father reduced to near homelessness. "We have to help him," she pleaded one night, tears streaming down her face. "He has nowhere else to go." And so I did what seemed right. I offered Howard the guest house on our property, a beautifully converted barn with its own entrance and privacy. I created a position for him at my company, mostly administrative work that kept him occupied and gave him dignity. I even restructured our payroll to provide him a comfortable income that wouldn't attract attention from his creditors. "You're saving him," Eliza whispered the night he moved in, kissing me with what I thought was genuine gratitude. Not everyone would do this for their in-laws. For the first few months, Howard seemed appropriately humble. He brought wine to our dinners, offered business advice that occasionally had merit, and treated me with a newfound respect. I started to believe that adversity had changed him, that perhaps we could actually become family in more than just name. What a goddamn fool I was. The change was gradual. First came the small comments when Eliza and I would disagree about something. "Your father would never have spoken to your mother that way," Howard would say, shaking his head as if disappointed in my lack of sophistication. Then the criticism of my business decisions, always framed as helpful guidance. "If you'd invested in commercial properties instead of residential renovations, you'd be driving something better than that truck by now." I brushed it off. The man had lost everything. If he needed to feel superior in small ways, I could handle it. But then I began noticing changes in Eliza. She started making comments about my clothes, suggesting I dress more professionally, even on weekends. She compared our home unfavorably to the houses of her friends whose husbands worked in finance or tech. When I'd come home tired, sometimes with dust still on my boots after checking on a work site, she'd wrinkle her nose as if I'd tracked in something offensive. "I think Howard's rubbing off on you," I joked one night after she made a comment about upgrading to a proper neighborhood. "Maybe he just reminds me of certain standards," she replied, not meeting my eyes. The first real flag came from my office manager, Deb. She'd been with me since the beginning and didn't mince words. "Howard's been on a lot of long lunches with Eliza lately," she mentioned casually one afternoon. "3 times this week. Always comes back looking pretty pleased with himself." I dismissed it. Probably just father-daughter time. He's had a rough year. Deb gave me a look. "Just thought you should know." Then came the late nights. Eliza's work events that somehow never appeared on her company's official calendar. The password suddenly appearing on her phone. The way she'd step outside to take calls. The weekends when she needed to catch up on projects, but her laptop remained untouched in her office. I'm not a jealous man by nature. I've always believed that trust is the foundation of any relationship. But I'm also not stupid. Something had shifted, and Howard was somehow at the center of it. Instead of confrontation, I chose information. It wasn't hard to sync our cloud accounts. We'd set them up years ago when we first got married. Her deleted texts weren't completely gone, they just moved to a different folder. The dashboard camera I installed in her car was actually my own idea for a company security measure, repurposed for personal use. What I discovered made me physically ill. There was Julian Mercer, her college boyfriend who had gone on to become a venture capitalist. The same Julian who had attended our wedding with pointed comments about settling down too early. The same Julian who now sent my wife messages like, "Howard says you're free this weekend. Booked us the suite at the Lakeview. Can't wait to see what you're wearing underneath that business suit." There were the voice recordings from her car, catching conversations I was never meant to hear. "Dad, I can't just leave him," Eliza's voice, annoyed. "There's the prenup." "The prenup doesn't cover business assets acquired during the marriage," Howard replied smoothly. "And he's put 30% of the company in your name. We just need to time this right. Julian has connections that could triple the value of those shares before you file." What if Alex suspects something? Howard's laugh chilled my blood. "Alex?" The man wears dusty boots to dinner and thinks a vacation means camping. He's too busy playing with his construction toys to notice anything. Just keep playing the doting wife for a few more months. There were the hotel receipts, always paid with Howard's recovered credit card. The restaurant bills for 3, where they'd apparently discussed business opportunities. The emails they thought were deleted, where Howard outlined a full exit strategy for Eliza. "Once the shares transfer completes and we secure the additional line of credit against the business, you'll file for divorce citing emotional neglect. We'll liquidate your portion immediately through Julian's firm. Alex will never recover from the hit, and you'll be free to upgrade your life. Julian's already talking about Aspen for Christmas." But the most damning evidence came from a recording at our own dinner table, on a night when I'd been called away to handle an emergency at a job site. I'd forgotten my phone and came back to retrieve it, activating the voice memo function and leaving it under some papers before heading out again. A split-second decision I'm still not sure how to justify, except that my instincts were screaming. "To Alex," Howard said, and I could hear the clink of wine glasses. "The most oblivious man in town? May he never look too closely at those investment documents." "Dad, that's mean," Eliza giggled, actually giggled, without a hint of genuine protest. "Mean," Julian's voice now. "The man's signature is worth millions and he doesn't even read what he signs. I've never seen easier money." "He does work hard," Eliza offered weakly. "Hard work is for people without connections," Howard dismissed. "You married a mule when you could have had a racehorse. We're just correcting that mistake." They laughed, all 3 of them. In my home, drinking my wine, plotting my financial and emotional destruction. That night, alone in my office with the evidence spread before me, something broke inside me. Not just my heart, my entire worldview. I had believed in second chances, in loyalty, in the basic decency of family. Now I saw only calculation, betrayal, and contempt. I made myself listen to every recording, read every message, study every receipt. I needed to understand the full scope of their deception before I could decide how to respond. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Instead, I planned. First, I contacted my lawyer, Marcus, an old friend from business school who specialized in both corporate and family law. I shared everything, sworn him to absolute secrecy, and asked for his unvarnished advice. "They've been careful," he admitted after reviewing the evidence, "but not careful enough. The conspiracy is clear. Howard breached his fiduciary duty to the company while plotting with outside parties to devalue your assets. That's actionable. The infidelity gives you grounds to nullify certain provisions in the prenup. But Alex," he hesitated, "this will get ugly. Very ugly." "It's already ugly," I replied. "I just want justice." With Marcus's guidance, I began a systematic dismantling of the trap they'd set for me. Step 1. Asset protection. I quietly reversed the share transfers that hadn't yet been fully executed. I moved key contracts to a new corporate entity that Howard had no knowledge of, perfectly legal since they were still in negotiation phases. Step 2. Evidence compilation. I hired a private investigator to document the ongoing affair, creating a timeline that correlated exactly with Howard's employment at my company and his access to sensitive business information. Step 3. Alliance building. I met individually with each family member who would be attending Howard's upcoming birthday dinner. His sister, his cousins, Eliza's brother, people who had lost money in his previous financial scandal but had forgiven him. I didn't reveal what I knew, but I asked pointed questions about whether Howard had approached them for new investments. Many had uncomfortable stories to share, painting a picture of a man rebuilding his old schemes from within the safety I had provided him. Step 4. The trap. I arranged for a large corporate account to appear to be in negotiation, a fabricated opportunity that would seem irresistible to Howard. With Marcus's help, we created documentation suggesting I was about to transfer significant business holdings into a new joint venture. The paperwork looked legitimate but would never actually execute. All the while, I maintained a perfect facade of oblivion. I worked late. I came home exhausted. I barely noticed when Eliza made excuses to be away. I asked Howard's advice about important business decisions and thanked him profusely for his wisdom. I mentioned the fictitious deal in casual conversation, noting how it would change everything for our family's future. The final piece fell into place when Howard suggested we celebrate his birthday with a family dinner at our home, the perfect opportunity to discuss exciting new directions for the business. He even insisted on inviting Julian, describing him as a potential investor who's become a close family friend. I agreed enthusiastically and offered to handle all the arrangements. I would give them exactly the audience they deserved. Howard's birthday dinner was an elaborate affair. I spared no expense. Premium steaks, top-shelf liquor, a professionally decorated dining room with arrangements of his favorite flowers. 14 people gathered around our extended table. Howard's sister and her husband, 2 cousins and their spouses, Eliza's brother and his wife, a couple of old friends who Howard had insisted on inviting, likely potential marks for whatever scheme he was brewing, Julian, and of course, the 4 central players in this drama, Howard, Eliza, Julian, and myself. I played the perfect host, making sure everyone's glasses stayed full. Howard held court at the head of the table, regaling everyone with stories of his comeback and the visionary opportunities on the horizon. Eliza sat beside Julian, maintaining a respectable distance, but exchanging glances that would have been obvious to anyone paying attention. I caught Howard's sister Catherine watching them with narrow eyes. She'd always been more perceptive than her brother gave her credit for. When the main course was finished, I signaled for the servers I'd hired to clear the plates and bring in the birthday cake. As they worked, I stood and tapped my glass with a spoon. "Before we bring out the cake, I'd like to make a toast to the man of the hour," I announced, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Howard beamed, clearly expecting platitudes about his wisdom and anticipated business success. Eliza shifted uncomfortably in her seat, perhaps sensing something in my demeanor. "Howard came into our lives during a difficult time," I began. "He had lost everything, his home, his reputation, his livelihood. Many men would have been broken by such a fall. But not Howard." Murmurs of appreciation around the table. Howard nodded magnanimously. "When someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time," I continued. "That's a lesson I've learned recently. Howard showed the world who he was during his first financial scandal, but I chose to believe he deserved a second chance. I welcomed him into my home, into my business, into my life." I looked directly at Howard now. His smile had faltered slightly. "I'd like us all to understand exactly how Howard has repaid that trust." I pulled out my phone and connected it to our dining room sound system. I kept my eyes fixed on Howard as I pressed play. Howard's voice filled the room. "Once the shares transfer completes and we secure the additional line of credit against the business, you'll file for divorce citing emotional neglect. We'll liquidate your portion immediately through Julian's firm. Alex will never recover from the hit." The color drained from Howard's face. Eliza froze, her hand halfway to her water glass. I switched to another recording. Julian's voice now. "The man's signature is worth millions, and he doesn't even read what he signs. I've never seen easier money." Then the most damning one, Howard again. "You married a mule when you could have had a racehorse. We're just correcting that mistake." I clicked off the audio, and the room sat in stunned silence. Then I walked to our television and connected my laptop. "For those who prefer visual evidence," I said calmly, bringing up a carefully edited montage. Hotel security footage showing Eliza and Julian entering and exiting rooms. Timestamps of Howard's office computer accessing confidential company files and emailing them externally. Screenshots of text exchanges plotting the timeline for my financial ruin. I turned to face the table. Eliza was ashen, her eyes wide with shock. Julian looked like he might bolt for the door at any second. Howard's expression had morphed from shock to calculation, already trying to find an angle, a way to explain this all away. "Catherine," I addressed Howard's sister directly, "did you know your brother has been approaching your son about investing his college fund in a guaranteed return opportunity? The same language he used before the last collapse." Catherine's gasp and furious glance at Howard told me everything. "Robert," I turned to Eliza's brother, "has he mentioned the beach property opportunity in Costa Rica? The one that doesn't actually exist except as a shell company he registered last month?" The expressions around the table transformed from shock to dawning anger as each person realized they'd been targeted in Howard's newest schemes. Before anyone could speak, I placed a manila envelope in front of Eliza. "Divorce papers," I said simply. "Already filed with the court. You'll find that thanks to the evidence of conspiracy and fraud, the prenuptial protections you were counting on have been legally nullified. You get nothing from the business. The house is being sold, with proceeds going to reimburse the people your father defrauded. Twice." I turned to Julian, whose tan had taken on a sickly pallor. "The SEC is very interested in your firm's activities, particularly the pattern of targeting family-owned businesses through extramarital affairs. My attorneys are meeting with their enforcement division on Monday. I suggest you find good representation." Finally, I faced Howard directly. "You have until noon tomorrow to remove your belongings from my property. After that, anything remaining will be donated. The locks will be changed. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. The lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress has already been filed. I picked up my glass once more. To loyalty, I said quietly, and to consequences. I drained my glass and set it down with a decisive click. Then I walked out of the silent room, leaving them to face the family members whose trust they had all betrayed. That night was the last time I set foot in that house. I had already moved my essential belongings to a temporary apartment. The business continued operations seamlessly under the new corporate structure I had established. Howard had never been given access to the actual operational components, only the administrative side that I could afford to disrupt. The fallout was swift and complete. Julian disappeared first. By morning, his social media had gone dark, his office claimed he was on leave, and Eliza's desperate calls to him went unanswered. Within a week, news broke that his firm was under federal investigation for securities fraud. His other clients began jumping ship, filing their own lawsuits to recover investments. The venture capitalist who had mocked my work boots would likely be wearing prison-issued shoes within the year. Howard fared no better. With no home, no job, and fresh lawsuits from both me and the family members he'd attempted to defraud again, he quickly discovered that his connections had evaporated. The few who took his calls did so only to berate him for his betrayal or demand repayment of old debts. Last I heard, he was staying at a rundown extended-stay motel, applying for retail jobs under a slightly altered name to avoid his internet reputation. The man who once mocked others for their common work was now begging for minimum wage positions and being rejected. As for Eliza, the social devastation hit her hardest. Our divorce proceedings became public record, including the evidence of her affair and conspiracy. When the story reached our social circle, as these things inevitably do, she discovered how quickly people distanced themselves from scandal. The friends who had dined in our home now crossed streets to avoid her. The same society events she had found me embarrassing for not attending now left her name off guest lists entirely. Her professional life collapsed alongside her personal one. Her company, concerned about association with financial impropriety, placed her on indefinite leave. Job applications went unanswered. Her carefully curated social media presence became a battleground of thinly veiled accusations and outright condemnation. The woman who had deemed me insufficient watched her own reputation and prospects disintegrate in real time. I heard she eventually moved back to her mother's house in another state, starting over with nothing but a tarnished name and the knowledge that she had destroyed something genuine for a fantasy that vanished at the first sign of trouble. As for me, I sold the house at a profit and donated Howard's renovated guest house to a program supporting victims of financial crimes. The business not only survived, but thrived once I refocused on our core strengths without Howard's ambitious distractions. I kept my head down, delivered quality work, and let my actions speak for themselves. I won't claim the betrayal didn't leave scars. For months I woke in cold sweats, haunted by their laughter at my expense. Trust doesn't come easily to me anymore. But there's a strange peace in seeing justice served, not through violence or vengeance, but through simple exposure of truth. Sometimes I drive past that motel where Howard now lives, watching him trudge to the bus stop in the clothes I once bought him. I don't feel the satisfaction I expected. Instead, there's a hollow recognition. He was always this small, this pathetic. I just couldn't see it before. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter from Eliza. Pages of tearful apologies, explanations about her father's influence, pleas for another chance. I read it once, then filed it with the rest of the evidence. Some betrayals can't be undone with words. Howard still tries to contact me occasionally, with schemes thinly disguised as apologies. I've blocked his number, his email, every avenue he might use to slither back into my life. There are no second chances for second chances wasted. The hardest lesson wasn't the betrayal itself, but recognizing that my own generosity had enabled it. I had given Howard the platform to hurt me. I had trusted blindly when I should have verified. I learned that kindness without discernment isn't virtue, it's vulnerability. I'm rebuilding now, more cautiously, but perhaps more wisely. My business continues to grow. I've renovated a cabin by the lake, the kind of place Eliza always considered too rustic, too simple. There's a peace in simplicity that wealth can't buy. Some nights, sitting on the dock watching the sunset, I think about loyalty, what it means, what it costs, what happens when it's broken. I think about the price Howard paid for betraying it. Not the price I extracted, but the true cost. A life stripped down to its hollow core, revealed as nothing but a series of calculations and schemes. In the end, that's punishment enough. To live as nothing but what you truly are, when what you truly are is nothing at all. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.